Well, good morning, everybody.
Mute.
No, Judith, you needed to be muted. Thank you. Okay, excellent. We're all learning. And again, I will say, this is all new to me also, and I'm so grateful to many people in the congregation, most of our younger folks in the congregation who have been so generous with teaching me how to do some of this as well. So we're going to start, as we do every morning, with Judy Ribnick leading us in something from the Psalms.
Good morning, Boker Tov. Good to see everybody. I posted on the screen. Yeah, just scroll up a little bit. It's right after Saul's greeting to everybody. From the Psalms and also from the Haggadah. And I would say after the class today, go dust off your Haggadot. It's time to bring them out. And we're going to do a song from the Haggadah. I'll post in the chat a little bit later too. God is my strength and my song. It will be my salvation. Rabbi, another word for salvation? You're muted.
Yes, I'm unmuting. So, or salvation, or rescue, or redemption, or saving, or source of redemption, source of saving. That.
Okay, so that's Psalm 118, and it also was back in Shemot in Exodus chapter 15, verse 2. Ozi vezimrat Yah Vayehi Lishua. Ozi vezimrat Yah Vayehi Lishua. Ozi Zimarat Yah Vayehi Lishua. Ozi Zimarat Yah Vayehi Lishua. Let me see you humming by Move Your Head. Yalailai, ailai, or your hands. Ailai, we look so great. Ay.
Use it to stretch.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you so much. And for some of you, that might be super familiar, and for others, it's brand new. And that's kind of the beauty of the community we're building together in the Psalms studying group. I want to just repeat a couple of things. Harold has started a Facebook group. And if you, hopefully you've been invited to join it. If not, write your name in the chat. And so we can make sure during the days beyond the 45 minutes we're studying, people could share things or ideas about Psalms. And last night, Harold and a few others posted some of the musical settings that I discussed yesterday that this Psalm number 2 was used in, particularly Chichester Psalms and Handel's Messiah. And the same, Handel's Messiah uses more verses than Chichester Psalms, but both use that opening sentence. But we'll get back to that in a second. And so we have a Facebook group that's closed only to people who are going to be discussing Psalms. So if you have other things you want to talk about, that's not happening on this Facebook group. This is going to be to really discuss Psalms, questions. You could add questions. You could add recordings or other translations as you find them. And also, I'll repeat again, we want to make sure we have everybody's email address so that we could communicate with everybody. And also, if you're interested in being on CBST's email notification system, so you can find out other things that are happening. I do want to say to everybody one more announcement before we get into the Psalms. We're going to have a town hall this Thursday night, which I will be sending out information about probably later today or tomorrow morning. We're going to do town halls periodically through this time. And we've invited Dr. Nate Goldstein to talk about what's going on in New York City hospitals and on the medical scene. Judith Turkel, a very prominent LGBT, a lesbian lawyer who's worked in the LGBTQ community for a long time, to talk about legal documents everybody should be considering. And I'll be talking about some of the Jewish issues involved. So look out for that, and looking forward to, that's going to be focused on CBST members to discuss how to be best prepared for the moment in time we are. The other way to be prepared is spiritually. So let's get to study. So as we'll start every study session, think about somebody for whom you want to dedicate your study today in their memory or their honor, but particularly we do this as Jews in memory of somebody when we sit down to study. So if you'd like to share that with everybody, put it in the chat, who you would like to be dedicating these moments of study in their memory or in their honor. And we'll begin with Psalm 2. So as we do, let's read through it in Hebrew. I did get my reading glasses, but I have to get a bigger text altogether. You see, my text is very small. It's really small. It's not meant for. And we're going to start with reading it in Hebrew. And I ask anybody who can to join me in your reading, and then we'll read it in whatever translation you have. All right. Psalm 2, verse 1. Lama ragshu goyim uleumim yehegu rik. 2, verse 2. Bet. Yit yatzvu malchei eretz v'roznim nosdu yachad al Hashem v'al Mashicho. Gimel 3. Ninatka et mosrotemo v'nashlecha mimenu avotemo. 4. Daled. Yoshev b'shamayim yischak Adonai yil'ag lamo. 5. Az yidaber alemo v'apo uv'chorono yivhalemo. 6. Vav. Va'ani nasachti malki al Tzion har kodshi. 7. Zion. Asapra el chok Adonai or Hashem. Amar elai b'ni ata. Ani hayom yiladiticha. Whoops. Can you close the door? Sorry about that. I think we're up to Chet. Sha'al mimeni ve'etna goyim nachalatecha ve'azuvatka afsei aretz. Tet. Tiroem b'shevet barzel kichli yotzer tinaptzem. Yud 10. Va'atam malachim haskilu hivasru shoftei aretz. Yud Aleph. Ivdu et Adonai be'ira v'gilu bir'ada. Yud Bet. Nashku var pen ye'anaf v'tovdu derech ki yiv'ar kimat apo ashrei kol chosei vo. 12 verses. Psalm 1 was 6 verses. This one is 12. So to review quickly, verses 1 and 2. And when I ask also for different translations, it worked great yesterday to put in the chat when we get to a particular word, to look at whatever translation you're working with and to offer that, and I'll read them out loud so we could see what some of the different translations, which are interpretations, say. So why do and I'm going to do a very simple translation for the first two. As we'll get deeper and deeper, we'll continue to deepen it. So why do the goyim, the nations or the peoples, rage, congregate, murmur? We had a lot of great translations for ragshu, tumult, ulu'umim yehegurik, and the peoples contemplate emptiness. Why do the kings of the earth, malchei eretz, melech is the word king, malchei eretz is making the distinction between kings of the earth, in other words, human rulers, and we're going to contrast that with the divine ruler of all. Why does the human rulers take counsel together? Al Yud He Vav He, against the Holy One. So why do human rulers who think they know what they're doing, so to speak, why do they take action together against the one who is the source of what is genuinely sacred, holy, and infinite? V'al Mashicho, and on his anointed. And remember, we talked yesterday, finishing Psalm verse 2, Mashicho, somebody rightly pointed out, Mashicho sounds like Mashiach or Messiah. And indeed it does, because it's from the same word, Mashicho, anointed one. And in Hebrew, the word Mashiach means anointed one. And what does an anointed one mean? What does it mean? That oil has been placed on their head. And in ancient Israelite practice, and by the way, in other ancient Near Eastern practices as well, when one was anointed as a leader, they were literally anointed. Anointed in English now is a metaphor, right? It means to be marked, but literally in ancient Near Eastern religions, to be anointed meant oil was put on your head. Harold, could you repeat? I missed what you just said. And Harold, as everybody should know, is a classicist. So I turned to Harold for Greek.
So I said that in Greek, anointed is Christos. So that is the translation back and forth with the Greek New Testament uses the word Christos for anointed or Messiah. So Jesus is the proper name of the man, and Christos means anointed or Messiah. And
now go ahead, sorry, Harold.
And the Queen of England is actually, the ruler, the King or Queen of England is actually anointed with oil during the coronation.
Wow.
To this day.
So that's, I didn't know that. And I watched The Crown. I don't remember that part. I'll have to go back to that. Oh, wow, yes.
And they play Zadok the priest, which is the Handel's part about Zadok was the Kohen Gadol. So there is really the anointing of the Queen or King of England is based on the anointing ceremony in the temple.
Wow, that's fantastic. So this, Harold is bringing up a point that will become even more visible as we move through this psalm, and why this particular psalm, many, but this is the first one that we're encountering for Christians, is very important psalm. So as Harold pointed out, Christos, did I pronounce that correctly, Harold? Or was it Christos?
Christos.
Christos, which in ancient Greek, and maybe even in modern Greek, and we see Randy trying to sneak in and out of the office. Our printer is here. So Randy is coming in and out. Randy is trying to sneak in and out. But Randy has to remember to put the sock back in the door. We have a lot of systems here to make all of this work for us. Does anybody listen to the daily podcast that the New York Times does? The editor-in-chief of the New York Times Magazine section said the other day on the podcast that the whole New York Times team is learning so much about each other that nobody knew. By having all these Zoom meetings, everybody's knowing about their kids, their families, the dogs that bark, the kids that cry. Yeah, so now you're getting to see behind the curtain, right? Anyway, so Christos, which means anointed, and is a translation of the word Mashiach, which in Hebrew just means anointed. In Hebrew, the word Mashiach or Mashicho, as Harold pointed out, was used to anoint kings all the time. And it meant the anointed one for sure, but it didn't mean the anointed one. It meant somebody who was anointed as a leader. But for Christians, the reading of this psalm becomes super important because it says, all the rulers, so we've read these first two psukim, all the rulers of the earth are against Yud He Vav He, God, the big God, and V'al Mashicho, and on his anointed one, which for Christians means Christos, his anointed one, meaning Jesus Christ. By the way, this is why traditionally Jews say the word Jesus, which was his given name or a version of his given name, and Jesus Christ, the word Christ means anointed one, means the Messiah. So traditionally, Jews will never use the word Christ because it is acknowledging that Jesus, Mr. Jesus, for whose name is just his given name, is the anointed one. So a traditional Jew will never say Jesus Christ, but can refer to Jesus as Jesus. And that's a whole other topic about how Jews, especially in the medieval period, referred to Jesus. But Mashiach is literally translated as Christos. So wherever you see the word Messiah, but it goes back to the translation of the word itself, meaning anointed one. But for Jews, anointed one doesn't mean part of the Holy Trinity or godly. It means anointed to be a leader. So we start to see a division in how we will read this psalm and how we'll read this particular verse. And to my Christian friends who are studying here, I don't know, there's not one right or wrong. It's a matter of which tradition you root yourself in, not a matter of right and wrong. All right, so verse 3, as somebody rightly pointed out as we were coming to the close yesterday, is really part of verse 2. So let's move on to verse 3. Ninatcha et mosrotemo. Let us remove their bands, v'nashlecha mimenu avotemo, and remove from us their cords. Let's try and understand what this verse means. So let's see some different translations that you have for verse 3 of Psalm 2. Can some people show us what different translations you have? And I'm going to point out structure while we're getting a few different translations up there. Again, notice in biblical Hebrew, poetry is indicated by two phrases that are separated by a semicolon, and one phrase will comment on, explicate, contrast the first one, both in the, so we start both phrases with a verb, and it is in the phrase, we call this the cohortative. For those of you who are grammar geeks out there, if we have any grammar geeks, this is the cohortative, which means the explanation of cohortative, or the way we use it in English, is the let us form. Let us do something. So we're cohortative. That form in Hebrew is called cohortative. It's a verb form in all languages. And in English, we usually translate that as let us blah, blah, blah. Let us do something, cohortative. So this verb form in Hebrew is let us in both the beginning of the first phrase and the second phrase. So just in terms of structure, it says, let us do X in the beginning of Gimel, and then let us do Y for the second phrase. Does everybody see this structure? Shake your head. If anybody doesn't see it, would you raise your hand so I can know whether I should keep, I'm happy to go as slowly as we needed, but the structure is super important. And it's visible in both the English and the Hebrew. And when we get to Alter, he'll help us see it even more in the English. But does everybody see that structure? Two phrases, and the phrase repeats a rhythm. Let us, blah, blah, blah. Let us, blah, blah, blah. So the verb form is the same, and what the verb is telling us to do is slightly different. So Harold, can you read us some of the different translations? Because once they leave my screen, I can't see them.
Absolutely. Let's see. They all start with let us. So there's, come, let us cut off their cords and throw off their ties from us. Let us break the ropes. So we have cords or ropes. Let us break the ropes of their oppression. Let us throw off the thick weave of heavenly rule. Let us break the cords of their yoke. Let us break the cords of their yoke, shake off their ropes from us. Let us cut their cords and let us cast off from ourselves their ropes. So we have cords and ropes, cut and cast off. Break the ties, throw away the cords. Let's see if anyone has it. Let us break asunder their bands and cast away from us their cords. Let's see, let us break apart the ties, the bands, the cords. Let us cut the cords. Let us tear off their fetters. Let us fling away their bonds, break their bonds. So we have, there's bands, bonds, cords.
Right. So you see the rhythm to that is it's some version of something that, first of all, let's ask the question, who is speaking? When we say let us, who is the speaker in this? You have to go back a verse or two. So who's speaking here? Who would you say is speaking this is clearly a quote, let us?
You can unmute yourself for just a minute by pressing your space bar if you'd like to speak. And then when you release it, you go back to mute.
And aristocracy in phrase 2.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Let us refers back to verse 2, the kings and the aristocracy.
Right. So the kings of the earth who are clearly set against, and remember, and I'll repeat this because it can't be said enough, in the Psalms, the concept of those who are good and are those who are increasing holiness in the world. Those who are bad are those who are decreasing holiness. So keep that vision in your head. So all those who are rulers of the earth in this psalm are those who are decreasing holiness, doing things that are against the order of creating holiness. Okay, so and remember I said every psalm could be read internally or externally. And when we get through all the words, when we get to the end, we'll talk about it again and again and again. So this is both internal. So it's an internal struggle for increasing holiness and decreasing holiness, and it's an external struggle. So we'll stay because it starts as an external. So Benjamin, are you Ben or Benjamin? Ben? Is it Ben okay? Ben. So Ben said correctly that the speakers here are going back to the sentence, we're talking about the Malchei Eretz. This isn't, right, the who are taking counsel together. Let us remove their bands and cast us away from their cords. What does that mean? So we have all these words of being, I'm going to actually learn how to do the breakout groups better, Harold. You and I work on that. Not for today, not for today, okay. But let's work, because I think this will be really a thoughtful thing to do, okay? So the rulers are taking counsel, and what are they saying? Let's remove their bands or cut off. All of those different translations said something that's tying people up and cast away from us their cords.
May I?
Who's Ben?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Ben. What do you think?
In straight Hebrew reading.
Say again?
In straight reading in Hebrew.
Yeah.
It's a straight translation of the Hebrew. It's a very simple one, actually. The kings and the aristocracy who are rebelling against God and his Messiah are saying, let us remove his reigns and stop his work.
And stop his work, what?
His work.
No, that's avotemu, not avot. No,
right.
Yeah.
Do not cast his reins away and don't follow the work that he requires.
Exactly. So they're saying that any of the restrictions or what God is asking from us, and again, what it means to be holy in the world, don't follow those things. Don't be restricted. Those things are actually restrictions. They're ropes. They're remember all the different things. They're things that tie us together, tie us up. Let's release ourselves. Let's liberate ourselves. So it's saying that the rule of Yud-Heh Vav-Heh is restricting us. We will liberate you. Okay, Daled. Yoshev Bashamayim Yitzchak. So Yoshev Bashamayim. Now you'll notice again, for those of you who are looking at the Hebrew, but it depends which translation you're looking at. Again, biblical Hebrew mostly starts with verbs. And verbs are where you see the strength of the poetry. Yoshev Bashamayim. Now remember we had the word Yoshev, which means sit or live. The word Moshav, which is a place where people live. Yeshiva, where people study, sit and study, all from these roots of being rootedness. Remember this word from Psalm 1? So this word was used in Psalm 1. If we look back at Psalm 1, remember in the first verse, it says, Uvemoshav leitzim lo yashav. Those who stay in the place of scorners, remember we worked on that word a lot, will not, you shouldn't stay around there. You shouldn't live there. So the word for Moshav, Yashav, Yoshev is a word of being rooted somewhere, of really staking a claim and saying, this is where I am. So by using it in this verse, it's saying, Yoshev Bashamayim, the one who sits in the heavens. Interesting, there's no even word for God here. It's the one who sits in the heavens, the one who is rooted in all that is holy. Heavens meaning the who is transcendent above us all. There are two in theology, theology meaning the study of what God means in the world. There are two ways that we traditionally think about the holy presence in the universe. One is transcendent, literally the word meaning above, to transcend. The God who sits, Yoshev Bashamayim. This is a very common image of God, who is above us, beyond us, and incomprehensible in some way. The other way of talking about God, the second way, which is dominant, both are dominant in Judaism, is what we call immanent, meaning in our world, what's inside of us, that we could find holiness both in the world out there and holiness inside of us. And in Jewish thought and theology, in different moments of philosophy, one is more dominant than the other, but both always exist in Jewish philosophy. So Yoshev Bashamayim is referring to the big power of the universe, the one who created us all, the power that is forever, that is infinite, that is not affected by the winds. Remember back in Psalm 1, by the winds that cast us about, that is rooted in this Bashamayim. So the one who is in heaven, Yishak, which means to laugh. It could mean a few other things too, but we'll leave that for now. So what does it mean? The one in heaven, Yishak, means the ones in heaven is not affected by these Malchei Eretz, the rulers of the earth who say this and that. The one who is infinite, who will outlast everything, looks at this and says, this is long-term nothing. Adonai Yil'ag Lamo. Yil'ag is some kind of mock or make fun of. My Lord or my master or the one above all will mock them. Let's do hey. Az yidaber alemo ve'apo. Az yidaber. So then he will speak. And again, we'll deal with gender after we've gone through the basic issues. Elemo ve'apo. So anger in Hebrew, the word means literally, it's a nostril. What's that word? When you say somebody's really, what's the phrase in English? Flared their nostrils. That's this image. It's that was flared his nostrils, or spoke to him in anger. Uvechorono you've halemo. And in his charono is anger, he will terrify them. Let's go to Vav, and to get this section done. Now here's another quote. Who is the speaker in verse 6? Va'ani, rather I, nasachti malki. I have nasach, appointed or laid my hands on, so to speak, malki, anointed my king, al Tzion har kodshi. Who is speaking in this verse? So in the first quote we have, it's Malchei Eretz, right? The Malchei Eretz, the kings, the human kings and the human rulers and the aristocracy. And who's speaking in this verse?
The widow of the psalm.
No,
What, Kenneth?
The widow of the psalm.
Hold on, I want to hear Kenneth Carpel.
I don't know.
I think it is in this,
Yeah.
I think this is Yud Hey Vav Hey. I think this is, I read this, Ben reads this as the writer of the Psalm. I read this as, which is an interesting reading. I have to go back and look. I think for this, I'd go with Kenneth, that it is Yud Hey Vav Hey. And what is Tzion? Tzion Har Kodshi. In Jewish tradition, what is Mount Zion? Mount Zion is the mountain that's next to Mount Har Moriah. Traditionally, it's a little bit to the south. And right now, that's where, for those of you who came on the CBST trip, we stayed at the Mount Zion Hotel, which overlooked Mount Zion itself over the valley. And it's traditionally, and it's where King David is traditionally considered as buried. By the way, Schindler is buried there in the cemetery there. And it's that's where it's traditionally seen. We don't really know where it is, but that's So Har Tzion also can be a metaphor, but Har Kodshi, my holy mountain. So here's the first time we're hearing about Tzion Har Kodshi. And again, this is continuing the quote. Zion, Asapra el Chok, I will tell of the rule or the decree. Yud He Vav He. Adonai Amar Elai B'ni Ata, Ani Hayom Yiladitacha. Now you get to see why for Christians this psalm tells of the coming of Jesus, and it speaks of Jesus as the son of Yud He Vav He. We Jews read it a little bit differently, but this is why Handel's Messiah so deeply cares about this psalm and so features the psalm in Handel's Messiah, because this is considered in the Psalms the first telling of the coming of Jesus for Christians. And it says, I who have anointed my leader on Zion, I will tell of the decree. And now who's the I here? Yud He Vav He said to me, B'ni Ata, you are my son. Ani Hayom Yilidticha, I who have given birth to you or begotten you. Chet. I just want to, so then the question becomes, who's speaking here? Sha'al mimeni ve'etna goyim nachlatecha va'azuvatcha afsei aretz. Ask of me, Sha'al, a question, ask of me, mimeni, and I will give goyim, I will give nations as your nachal, which is an inheritance, and your portion, afsei aretz, I will extend to the ends of the earth. Okay, I want to just point out a couple of interesting things language-wise. People might have noticed that in the Hebrew, for the Har Kodshi, my holy mountain, and Kodshi, for those of you who could see, is from the same word as Kodesh, Kedusha, Kiddush. All those words are for holy. So this is using the root word for holiness. Now, have we seen that word holiness yet? Not yet, right? Because back in verse 1, what we saw was tzaddikim for righteous. So these are adding to our words of the psalmist for describing things in which holiness exists. So the root for a tzaddik, for a righteous person, is the root for the word for justice, just, tzedakah, giving tzedakah, tziduk, so deket, tzedakah, and so that is for a person who is righteous, meaning that they do just in the world. And the other big word that we'll see over and over again is this root of the 3-letter root, kuf daled shin, for holy. So we're going to explore those throughout the Psalms, these two roots, tzadi daled kuf, and kuf daled shin, these words for holiness. And again, I'll keep saying this. It's not about good and bad in elementary school or high school kind of concepts of I'm good, you're bad. It's about how do you increase holiness in the world, and what do you do that decreases holiness? It is very common in biblical Hebrew for mountains to be places of holiness. This was very common in the ancient Near East. There are different things that have holiness attached to them, and we'll see that. So mountains are commonly seen as holy. It's not a coincidence that in the ancient Near East that we considered the Torah itself to be given to us on Har Sinai, on the mountain of Mount Sinai. Mountains are given a great deal of holiness. And you can imagine why in the ancient world mountains would have such significance. If mountains were the place, if you could climb them, would be the highest point you could reach. There was no planes, there was no steel. You couldn't build something very tall. The only thing you could reach that would physically be high would be a mountain. And so the idea that God would be found on a mountain, I mean, just think about, also, I think we've all had the experience of having our breath taken away when we get to a physical height and can look out. Some of us do it on the top of our rooftops, or We take a bridge like the Brooklyn Bridge. When the Brooklyn Bridge was built, it was the highest point in New York City, and it was so thrilling to walk on the Brooklyn Bridge because it was the highest point from which you could see anything in New York. We moderns, we forget, and maybe in this time of our social distancing, we're relearning some things about how exciting it would be to actually see something at a great distance.
The Greek gods lived on Mount Olympus.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you, Harold.
The Pharaoh created the pyramids on a flat desert land. And what else would be monolithic and create such power?
Exactly. To achieve height in the ancient world is something we have become a little bit inured to because we fly, we have high buildings. And I want you to, as we read the Psalms, remember the power of only achieving height through the natural world, or I think Jonathan's point is a good one, building the pyramids achieved that a height that couldn't be done otherwise. And the Greeks with the Mount Olympus, I love that imagery. So it's not just a random thing that a mountain is used for a place where you would experience holiness because of the ability to be able to experience that height. And we'll see this over and over again. And I think we have to think in our own, how do we, and this is my talk, the drash I gave on Friday night talking about Buber. Buber's concept of zwischen, of the in-between or benenut, is about where we in the natural, one of the places Buber talked about experience holiness is in the natural world, and mountains and height allow us to achieve that sense of zwischen or benenut or in-betweenness, because we can feel that expansiveness that you can't when you can only grow to be certain heights, etc.
Rabbi, we have a few hands up if you have.
Okay, great. Yes, let's stop. I'm sorry.
I saw Stephen's iPad first. Stephen's iPad, if you could unmute yourself and ask us your question.
Yes. Are you there?
Yes, we're here.
So my question, Rabbi, was when you were saying theology is the idea of God in the world, is that different than God actually being in the world? Is it just the idea, or is it actual?
So theology is actually the study of God. The word theology, right, Harold? Ology is study. So ology means, theology means the study of God. So I misspoke when I said the idea of God, but by using the word idea, I meant studying God. Okay. So when we talk about theology, it literally just means study. Theo is God. So theology is the study of God.
Simon and Sherry, unmute yourself and ask your question. You have your hand up.
Yes, Rabbi, in the verse that says, the Lord said to me, you are my son, I have fathered you this day. Who is the me?
You mean it's Yud Hey Vav Hey?
No, Yud Hey Vav Hey is the Lord said, but said to me, you are my son.
Oh, so this is going to be the big question. I'm not going to start that today. That's a big one. You can understand how Christians read that. And Simon, maybe tomorrow, will you sing this for us?
I will at least find the verse in Messiah.
Or, I mean, maybe tomorrow we could actually play I don't know, Harold, can we do that? Play the clip from Handel's Messiah that does these verses?
Sasha's on tomorrow. I'll have to see.
We'll have to ask. Thank our TAs, Harold and Sasha. But Simon, I think you did post, or somebody posted on the Facebook, the clip from, or the whole Handel's Messiah. But this,
I posted that, and then Ira posted it also. It's very beautiful.
And somebody did post. I didn't get to listen to these versions, but posted the minutes that these verses are sung. Right?
Yes.
Thank you.
So
Harold,
all of Handel's Messiah. I don't mean
Harold.
Yes.
I did not post Messiah. I posted the Bernstein.
The Bernstein.
Yeah.
Naomi Hirsch reminds us that, as we sang last week in Psalm 121, I lift up mine eyes to the mountains,
good
from whence
point.
my help comes.
Exactly.
Then,
that's a great example. Yes, thank you.
Nora, if you're here, you have a very interesting question that you posted about vindictiveness. If you wanted to pop on for a second and say that.
Sure. So I've been noticing, can everyone hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been noticing throughout the last couple of weeks that there seems to be a lot of moments where they're sort of like, right now the rulers are in power, but I know eventually they're going to fall, and that gives me some solace right now. And I've been uncomfortable with that it feels like I'm getting my holiness right now from wishing harm upon others. And I just wondered if that's a general take that people have.
I wouldn't say it's about the wishing the harm in the psalmist, although for sure it sounds like that. The way I live with it, Nora, is that I feel like it means, this is very Gandhian of me, is that they too will see, they will disappear, but not because they will necessarily be physically destroyed. They will disappear because they will learn to understand the truth.
Okay. I like that better.
And that's my Gandhian understanding, that our job is not to destroy our enemies, but to persuade them otherwise and to convert them into allies. That's a very quick answer, but I have a lot more to say about that, but maybe
thank you.
Sasha, you guys should help me stop at the 30-minute mark so we could really allow for questions.
Yes, we have a few. Shep has his hands up. Shep, would you like to jump on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, about the mountain thing.
About what?
About the thing about the mountains. The mountains,
yes.
Yeah. Well, Martin Luther King, I think in his famous speech said I've come to the top of the mountain. And of course, Moses died on Mount Nebo, seeing the land of Israel. And of course, in ancient times, the people built the Tower of Babel to get to God, because they knew that a height is. Also here in North America, Mount Shasta in the Northwest is a holy mountain to the natives. And I think in Australia, Uluru, Ayers Rock, I think is also holy to the Aboriginals.
Shep, that is a fantastic comment. And I would encourage people, if you have time today, to Google mountains as holiness, because Shep is right. It's not just the ancient world. It is in a lot of traditional religion, in a lot of traditions, the mountain is a source of holiness. Not only Native Americans and not only Australian natives peoples, but in all different kind of peoples. Think about the Aztec and the native peoples. And again, it's a very significant image. And of course, Martin Luther King was referring to been to the mountaintop, was to Moses also going to Nebo, what you just said. So beautiful, beautiful connection.
But Rabbi, how about in the Torah, somewhere it says that God will level the mountains and raise the valleys and make everything flat and plain?
Also in Handel's Messiah. Also in Messiah. But you know what? We're coming to the end of our time, so let's hold that for tomorrow. And Judy, so thank you everybody for joining us. I'm just loving the studying together. And please keep reading Psalm 2, coming up with great questions. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Judy, lead us out with some Psalms in song. Can't hear you, Judy.
Okay, I'm going to post something right now. 1 second. Did anything come up?
And I just want to say the room will stay open for 10 minutes and then it will close. So people are welcome to stay on and talk to each other. And then it'll close in 10 minutes. Okay, 1 second. Well, I want you to dust off your Haggadot, because we're going to sing a little bit of Adir Hu, God is great, and lofty, shall we say also. Let me just paste this one more time. It didn't seem to paste. 1 second, copy and bring it right here. Let's see if it goes now. Do you know why I might not be able to paste there, Harold?
I don't, but how many, just tell us what you're going to sing. Just say it. And then we'll
We're going to sing Adir Hu.
Which means what?
Which means God is awesome. It's an acrostic song. It's in the Haggadah. And it's fantastic. And it's time to dust off those Haggadot. And the melody, bum pai dai dum dai dai, pai dai 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 dai, pai dai 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 dai, pai dai 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 dai, pai dai dai ba dai, ya lai 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 lai. Is that coming back? Adir Hu. Even Eveto Bekaro, Bimehera, bimehera, biyamenu bekarov, el b'nei b'nei veitcha bekarov. One more verse, it's an acrostic. Bachur hu, gadol hu, dagul hu, yivnei veito bekarov, bimehera, bimehera, B'yameinu b'karov, el b'nei b'nei veischa v'karov. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be on for a few more minutes. I have the links there for Facebook. I've been approving people as we've been going, and the link for the email. So we can chat among ourselves. The rabbi has left the room.